word. And as always, feel free to just hop in the chat, maybe say who you are, which part of the world you're hopping in from. We're so excited to see you. And we'll just give it a minute to get started. Yeah, I would love to go back to Austin though.
Yeah.
So
If it's been a while since you've been here, it's probably changed a lot. It's grown like crazy. And, everybody wishes, I think, that the growth would slow down just a little bit because it's getting big. So,
right. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hear that. It's kind of like reminds me of New York a little bit. Just there's so much there, but it's just constantly growing.
It really is. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully one of these days I can come see you in Hawaii. That would be amazing.
That'd be great. Yeah, anytime. You got an open invitation. Come on down.
I have never been, but it's definitely on the bucket list.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'd love to show you around. So yes.
Amazing.
Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and just get started. If you want to just pop into the chat and say hi, that would be great. But just to give you a quick introduction for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Mylin Green. I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator here at Instant Teams, and I do programming, communications, and strategy around all things DEI. And I'm so excited to have our very special guest, Mindy Henderson, on today, who is a speaker, an author, an editor, a podcast host, and just debuted this really amazing book, The Truth About Things That Suck, that we're going to get into later. But just so happy to have Mindy on, and especially because this month was Disability Pride Month, and we want to get into a conversation about disability as diversity and what it really looks like to build more inclusive workplaces and societies in general. So this is going to be a 30-minute discussion. Pop in with any questions, with any comments that you have throughout. But with that said, I'm just going to pass it over to Mindy to just give a more full introduction, and then we're going to go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I've been looking forward to coming and chatting with you all. It sounds like you all do really good work around, diversity and inclusion, and try to be intentional about that in your values, which is honestly where it all starts, right? So I guess just a little backstory about me. My story really began when I was about 15 months old. I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular condition called spinal muscular atrophy. And that was more, what's the word I'm looking for? It had more of an influence on my life than I think I could have ever imagined. And I had sort of a series of fortunate events that happened in early life that I think really kind of directed the trajectory of where I am now, 48 years later. And so, being diagnosed with this condition, it did, I like to say, sentence me to life in a wheelchair. No chance of parole for good behavior or anything like that. And so I've lived my life from a wheelchair. And, I think that the first really fortunate thing that happened when I was young was, sheer luck, the family that I was born into, because my parents were only in their 20s when I was diagnosed. I had an older sister already, and they found themselves in this complicated world of medical systems and doctors and hospital systems. And I ended up diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which is a huge establishment. And they were told along the way that I would, in fact, lose all of my ability to stand and walk. But they were also told that I would lose all of my cognitive function and that I probably would not live to be 3. And despite everything that the doctors were telling them and that there was nothing that could be done, no treatments, no cures, my parents really became my first symbols of hope, and of how to have hope in the face of what the absolute experts in their field were saying was a hopeless situation. Because, even though they said I probably only had a couple of years and all of that, my parents decided that they really wanted to do everything they could in their power, to try to help me along the way. And so my dad did physical therapy with me and those sorts of things. And, long story long, I did start to get a little bit better and a little bit stronger. And 2 out of 3 of the doctor's predictions were proven false. And, I'm here today talking to you, cognitive function fully intact. And so, I think that was really the first fortunate occurrence, was just being born into this family that really instilled hope in me and a way to look at my future, with expectations. Because that was the other thing, is that they really had expectations for me despite my physical limitations. I had an able-bodied sister, and the expectations were the same. We were supposed to do well in school and have friends and interests and, go on and do in life what we wanted to do. And then, and I'll wrap it up, I'll land the plane. But the last thing that came up early in life for me was the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Came into our life and became a really incredible resource for my parents. And along the way, they asked me to serve them as their Texas State Goodwill Ambassador, and then the Florida State Goodwill Ambassador after my family moved. But I did that for about 8 years, and I got to do things like give speeches and go to events and be on television and meet celebrities and corporate executives and tell them what the MDA had done for me and things like that. And I think that's where I got the speaking bug, number one. But, I also really learned at a very young age how to turn a negative into a positive. And I think that there are always, good things that we can do with the challenges in our lives if we choose to look for them. And so, all that said, it led me down this long, windy road to what I'm doing today, being a speaker. And I work for the Muscular Dystrophy Association now as the editor-in-chief of their magazine, director of their media platform, and now an author. So
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Mindy. I mean, just hearing your story is, I always find it so fascinating to just hear people's origin stories and the way the path that they've taken to get to the place where they are right now. And, I actually, just as a side note, I got a Slack that the chat is disabled. So I'm just going to write something to see if you can all see it. Because it doesn't look like it's disabled on this end.
Oh, there, I see your note.
Okay, everyone should be able, hold on. Let's see if that fixed the problem. Thank you, Jacqueline, yes, it's working.
There we go.
Now.
Yay.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that Slack message. I appreciate you. Yeah, so hearing your story, hearing your background, just the importance of one, having that support system and network is so profound.
Yeah.
And, being someone, so just kind of getting into just more of the details of, your life and what you've experienced, being someone who uses a wheelchair. And I've been learning more so this month, being at Disability Pride Month, about ableism and about the oftentimes very unconscious bias and discrimination that we as a society have towards able-bodied people or for able-bodied people. And just the different layers of it. There's that in the medical industry, which, I've read, it views disability as something that needs to be fixed. And
Yeah.
then our society, which views it as, again, something that needs to be fixed, but also just tends to favor what we consider to be what we're used to or
Yeah,
able
it kind of
to do.
makes you an other in
Right.
society.
Right. Yeah. So could you speak with me just about, from your view and what your perspective, what you've seen, what you've noticed, just operating in the world?
Yeah, well, I think the strongest example that I have of just how off balance, things still are in terms of diversity where the disabled community is considered. I worked a 20-year career in high tech before doing the work that I'm doing now. And I worked over the course of that 20 years for 3 very large companies with thousands of employees. And in that 20 years, I was the only person in a wheelchair I ever saw. And that, I think, is pretty astounding, to go to work every single day with some unique challenges and needs, and to not see anyone else who looks like you or is maybe struggling in their own way with the same things as you. And so that is, my story in terms of how sort of off things still are. And then, as I've gotten into advocacy work, I've learned that the actual number, I love data. I love numbers and statistics and things like that. But I think that because I think that the stories that they tell can be really powerful. And one thing that I've learned over the last year or so is that in our workforce today, of all of the individuals with disabilities, and it's like 1 in 4 people in the United States have a disability, 27% of individuals with a disability who are available to work actually hold positions in our workforce today, as opposed to something like, I think it's 87% of the rest of the universe, of the universe of people in our country, people without disabilities. And between my lived experience and hearing those numbers, the two really tell the same story. And so it's really, for me, I feel like in 2022, we've got to do better. And I'm so glad that it's finally becoming a more prominent part of the conversation, because I think that, people with disabilities continue to be the most underrepresented group, clearly, in our workforce. And you can look at things like profits and revenue goals and things like that companies have. And when they employ people with disabilities, particularly in executive leadership roles and things, you can see the company's revenue increase by like 27%. So it's kind of amazing. I mean, I could talk about this all day long. But there's definitely a disparity. And when you talk about diversity, I think that individuals with disabilities are sort of one of the last groups of people to be considered, frankly.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that answer and for the data and the research. I feel
Yeah.
like that really grounds it, really to quantify it. And just to kind of go into that a little bit more. Actually, LaShonda too, I see that your hand is raised. If you have a question and you want me to pull you in so you can ask it, go ahead and type it in the chat. I'm not sure if you wanted me to pull you on, but I'm happy to add you into the conversation. Maybe not. I just saw it go away. So if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to utilize the chat. But so speaking about that, and that lack of representation, I think we all know how important it is to have images of yourself that are healthy and that are inspiring to look up to, and that expands your ideas of what is possible in your own life. And that's so important. And we've spoken a little bit about disability as diversity, which I think is really interesting, because a lot of times maybe in the DEI space, I feel like more so in the DEI space, but there's still work that can be done to be even more inclusive. So maybe could you just speak about that a little bit, disability as diversity?
In terms of how companies can be more inclusive?
I think in terms of, reframing disability as a possible hindrance into it's actually diversifying the company and diversifying the society, and just having different perspectives that actually enhance everyone.
Yeah, well, and you made a really good point. You brought up sort of the medical versus the social definitions of disability and those sorts of things. And you're right. I think that there is a lot of that unconscious bias still in the United States, where, people look at other people with disabilities as, there's something wrong with you. There's something to be fixed. And, in all actuality, we all have disabilities in life, whether they're physical or emotional or financial, or, there's so many different ways that we all can be at disadvantages in our lives. And I think that as a society, there's a lot of opportunity for us to reframe the way that we look at disability, not in terms of something's wrong with you, something needs to be fixed, but in terms of you have different abilities than I do. And, we all have strengths and weaknesses. That's another way to look at it. One of my weaknesses is my ability to go, walk around the room or carry my laptop to a conference room or things like that. That's one of my weaknesses. But some of my strengths that actually come from being a disabled person are, problem solving skills. I solve problems every single day related to my disability and how to architect a life that works for me and in a world that's really not entirely built for people with disabilities. And so I think, people with disabilities are great problem solvers. We're creative. I think that my disability gives me a compassion and an awareness of other people that makes me an effective leader, and things like that. Anytime you've got a workforce that has a certain level of diversity and different life experiences that people bring to the table, I'm going to think of things that you might not, just because of my own life experiences and vice versa, and so I think that when it comes to looking at a company or an employer, having a workforce that is diverse in every way possible, I think it's going to make you much, much stronger, because the perspective and the lens that your employees are going to look through things, at things to solve problems and create new products and services and things like that. It's going to be different and varied and help you to think of things that your competitor won't think of, and so, yeah, I think that it's important just to look around and make sure that you've got representation from every possible direction, and it's just going to solidify your competitiveness and your effectiveness as a company and as an employer.
That's such an incredible answer. Thank you. I feel like you touched on so many great points, just from being the architect of your life, but also just those practical aspects and tools that when we have more diversity in our organizations, in our companies, it enhances the way that we perform. There was actually a study from Economic Geography, it came out a while ago, but it said that teams with more diversity in executive leadership are more likely to produce and create more products than teams who have homogeneous leadership. So I think, and then expanding that diversity to be more inclusive, it just increases, to your point, our ability to create and to innovate and to collaborate. So I love that.
100%,
I love
100%.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this conversation. I want to get into your book. I want to have time to speak about your book. So just share with us maybe like, when did the idea first come up to create this book, and a little bit about the process that you've gone into to write it?
Wow, it's how long do we have? It's honestly, it's a 12-year project in the making. And I think that I've always loved writing. I've always loved words. And I think the first time that it occurred to me to maybe write a book one day, I was probably 8 or 10. And so my love of writing really started early. But then it was probably about 12 years ago when I started to kind of get immersed in like more into the personal development field and things like that, and started reading a lot of books in that area. And I got a little bit obsessed with goal setting and personal development and things. And I started to get an idea that, one of my strengths is navigating adversity. And I've had a lot of opportunity over the years to learn to be really good at navigating my own adversity. And, the idea started to sort of emerge from there as a very high level idea. And over the course of 12 years, I went through probably 3 or 4 iterations of, what book this was actually going to materialize as. In nonfiction, one of the things that you do is write a book proposal for a book. You actually write that before you write the manuscript itself, and you have to sell your proposal to an agent and to your publisher and all of that. And the proposal alone is like a 65-page document. It's not a small feat. And I probably wrote 3 of those over the course of 12 years and shopped them around and got feedback. And ultimately, I was working with a mentor over the last year and a half, and I had gotten an agent, I had gotten a publishing contract, and I was starting to write the book. And I was really, I was struggling with the framework of the book, because I didn't want it just to be a book about disability or for people with disabilities. I wanted anyone who picked up the book to be able to find themselves in it. And so this mentor that I was working with is also an author, and he and I came up with the idea together to structure the book as I think it's 17 chapters. And each chapter is sort of a theme of adversity that I think a lot of us, if not all of us, can relate to. It's things like job loss and illness and shame and loneliness and rejection and all of these things that we come up against in life that are hard. And I talked through in the chapters how they've sort of materialized in my life and how I've navigated them and sort of the lens that I've learned to look at them through. And it all comes down to kind of, I think, the mindset that we live with and that we choose to look at our problems with. And so that's the book that is out in the wild now. It actually came out an audiobook yesterday. So it's available. You should be able to go into any bookstore and either find it or order it. And then the audiobook is out there now as well. So, I write, I think, very much the way that I speak. And so I tried to make it, even though some of the topics are kind of heavy, I tried to make it light and almost like you were sitting in the room with your best friend having a glass of wine, talking and at times laughing about these ridiculous things that happen to us in life.
I love that. I love that. That's so great. That's such a huge milestone. And, could we go into, as we're kind of rounding up our time here, and then I'm going to go into our final question. But what is something, and this could be hard to do, maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but if you could pick like one or two things from the book that you were like, wow, this was such interesting information that I learned, and I really want people to have this tip and this tool and this practice, like
Yeah.
one or two things that stand out to you, what would they be?
One of my favorite things to talk about is, and you mentioned that I had the opportunity, I actually interviewed a lot of people for this book, and there are other stories besides mine that are kind of weaved in and out of the book a little bit, because I wanted other people's perspectives, not just mine, on how to get through the hard things in life. And one of the people who I got to interview is a guy named Sean Aker, who is, first of all, one of the nicest people on the planet. He's a New York Times bestselling author of The Happiness Advantage. He's a happiness researcher. I mean, best job ever, I feel like. And he let me interview him for this book. And one of the things that he told me that really resonated was that in any of our lives at any given time, there can be multiple realities that exist simultaneously that are equally true, and so at the same time that something really awful or really devastating may be happening in our lives, there are additional things that exist in our lives, additional realities that are equally true, that are good, and part of, I think, what can pull you out of the negativity of the hard situation and help you maybe to look at it a different way is reconnecting with what those positive things are in your life, and not just what they are, but what meaning they hold for you. And so that was one of the things I think that that I personally learned from writing this book, that I draw upon over and over and over again. And the other thing that I talk a lot about in the book is, me personally, I've learned to ask myself a lot who it is that I want to show up as in this world. And good times or bad times, I think it can really kind of snap you into the moment and the response that you're having to a situation, and say, no, this isn't who I want to be right now. I don't want to be this awful, negative, angry person. I want to be someone who's constructive and who's going to be solution oriented instead of problem oriented. And, this is so ridiculous, I'm just going to laugh at it right now, and so that's, I think, the second thing that I would say that is a fairly dominant theme in the book that I talk a lot about, but it's something that's really helped me.
Those are such incredible answers. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Like just that mindset piece, but then
Yeah.
also how do we want to show up? And
Yeah.
I feel like this, that quote at least is attributed to Einstein. It made me think of that while you were talking, that, the most important thing that we can ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place? Is it a
Yeah.
friendly place? And just to have that inside, because maybe we're seeing things and maybe we're not experiencing that. But to your point, just choosing to look for those things, to
Yes.
look for that reality is such an empowering thing. And I love
Yeah.
that. I feel like I could have these conversations, like this could be so much longer, but I know we're rounding up on time. So if
Yeah.
you all have any questions, just real quick, pop them in the chat. But maybe just to end, what's one thing that you see that employers could do, specifically maybe in remote workspaces, because we are in a remote space, workspace, to increase, to be more inclusive, to increase inclusivity now? What's something that we could do?
I think, oh gosh, There's so much I want to say, and I know that we're almost out of time. But I think it starts in the recruiting process.
Mhm.
It's there's a couple of things, and we kind of alluded to this earlier when I talked about your company and how intentional you all are being, and that you're doing a really good job of looking for diversity and inclusion and all of that. And I think when it comes to something like diversity and inclusion, it can't be a box that you check. It can't be something that you do because you have to do it. I feel like it's really something that has to be woven into the fabric of the values of your company. And it's something that you have to live every single day. And I think that that starts with who you're continuing to bring into your fold, into the company, and recruiting with some intention to look for diversity in the workforce. And there's, I don't know why I want to say this right now, but I heard something really cool recently. I actually went to a disability inclusion training the other day, and the company that was doing the training talked about accommodations that people with disabilities might need as they come into your company. And I think it continues to be one of the biggest deterrents to people hiring people with disabilities, because they assume that the accommodations and things they're going to need are going to be very, very expensive, when in fact, on average, any accommodation a person might need tends to be like $500 or less, and sometimes nothing. And so we have to be careful of assumptions. And what the thing that this company talked about was, instead of looking at it in terms of accommodations, almost reframing your whole vocabulary. They actually call them success enablers, and there are things that not just people with disabilities, but that all of us need or could use that would make us more effective at our jobs. And so if you look at accommodations in that way, again, through that lens, I think it's going to be really helpful. And things like making a practice of, I know that you're a remote company, but if you are bringing someone on site, if you're doing interviews with a person, I think just making a practice of asking them every single time, no matter who they are or what they may have said to you leading up to it, ask them if there are any special accommodations that they need that would help them with this interaction or with the visit or whatever the case may be. So yeah, those are a few sort of rambly ideas. There's so much to say, but
I love that. That's so great. Just like the recruitment process, those values. I see too, Erin just popped in success
I saw
enabler. Thank
Aaron's
you,
note. That was
loving
nice.
words, Mindy, and truly spoke to my wordy heart. I love that.
I
And
love
then I
it,
see
Aaron.
Shonda sharing her story in the chat, born to two drug addicted parents and not growing up in a household that included either, caused me issues until I chose to look at my life or my differences from a different perspective. I love the way you switch lenses. I never thought of it that way, but it totally fits and could fit into those areas of our lives that we feel make us different. Thank you for your time and inspiration. I absolutely love that. And similar, being born in like a really rough area in Philadelphia, being surrounded by a lot of crime, a lot of drug use, and a lot of fear on my day-to-day life, just being in high crime, high gang activity neighborhood. You can see that you can choose to go into that, or you can choose to put your perspective and shift your attention to something else. And fortunately, I had people who helped me to encourage me to put my attention on other things and to see the possibility and not the limitations that were surrounding me. But it really makes all the difference. And I so love these conversations. I feel like we're going to have to start having them later and doing like them for an hour, because I really feel like we could keep going.
Definitely.
But I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for joining in, for the few of you who have stayed on, and be sure to get Mindy's book, The Truth About Things That Suck. It sounds so phenomenal. And I personally can't wait to read it. I'm downloading it on Audible today. So
awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic. I love that you guys are having these conversations. And you know, it's important that we share our stories. It's important that we talk about these things, and I applaud you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'd love to have you back again. So yeah, we'll invite you back on.
I would love it anytime.
All right,
Thank
you all have
you.
a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.